Taylor. Taylor, I just wanted you to know it's Christina of Valdivia Alcala on.
Oh. Okay, that's... What is that at the top? That's Valdivia Alcala. Yeah, I guess I'll ask her. I'll ask her offline. I'll rename it. Okay, we're ready though. Whenever.
Ready? All right, let's go. All right, welcome to the March 15th Public Works Infrastructure Committee meeting. Would ask that we start with some introductions. My name's Neil Dobler, District 7.
Tony Emerson representing District 4.
And Councilman Lesser.
Councilman Lesser, District 9.
Thank you. We also have Brent Trout and various city staff with us, a lot of city staff. Appreciate you all being here. Always a lot of good information. We will call the meeting to order. First order of business is the meeting minutes from our February 15th meeting. If there's not any corrections, I'd entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay.
I'll second it. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion passes. All right, we are going to move right into our first presentation of the afternoon. City Manager.
Thank you. First one is the bridge over.
Jehan.
John is going to do that for us. So,
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Lesser.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Councilman.
I don't know if I'm the only one. I have my volume up at 100%, and I'm not getting very good volume. I don't know if anybody else who's logged in is having the same issue. It could be me, but
No, thank you, Councilmember Lesser. This is Braxton. I can barely hear anything that he is saying.
Yeah, and we're getting a lot of feedback on the from the online portion of that. So we're going to take just a 30-second break and see if we can. All right. Does that take care of the feedback? Okay.
I told them to turn it up a little bit back.
All right. And is that our presentation coming? Okay. Councilman Lesser, is that volume better?
not very much. Braxton, is it much better for you?
No, I can still barely hear anything he's saying.
I agree. This is Christina. I don't know if everybody has a mic or not, if their mics are on, if they're speaking directly into them either. I'm not sure.
Yeah, we at least Councilman Emerson and I have mics, so if you're not hearing us very well, then it must be a system issue. Give us just a minute and see if we can.
It's like tech support asking you, do you actually have it plugged in? Is the computer on?
Can you reboot? Yeah. All right. I don't know if that's any better. We're going to go ahead with the bridge presentation since that is fairly visual. Go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Jehan Zib, and I'm working as an infrastructure planner with the Public Works Department. And we started this.
Yeah, make sure. There we go.
So we started this Topeka Asset Management System, and as part of the system, one of the components is to develop a bridge management program. So in line with the requirements of the Topeka Asset Management System, we have started building up the bridge management program as part of the overall system. So today's presentation, I will discuss two
Mr.
items.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, yes.
I cannot hear anything. I'm going to be logging off.
Okay.
If you guys get it fixed, let me know.
All right, thank you. Hold on just a second. Is there anything we can do to? I don't want you to get up and leave the room, and then we're done.
I second that.
Neil's, just as an FYI, Neil's audio had cleared up quite a bit. Then when we got to the next speaker, it became almost inaudible. Even the transcription that y'all are using as, I don't know, as an ADA component was having problems with the words.
Are you picking me up fairly well still?
Yeah, you sound much better.
Okay, I think what I'm going to ask somebody to do is just take my microphone, and I don't know if yours is not working. Okay, try this.
This is working. Can you hear me clearly?
Must not. Christina, can you hear me?
So is that you, Emerson?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, you sound far off, but if I listen real close, I can make out what you're saying.
Okay.
You're not as clear and as loud as Neil is.
Okay, let's just move my microphone around. A little cumbersome, but if that works, great.
I think that's a good idea.
You need to speak right into it.
Okay. That's all. Okay, so for today's presentation is composed of two components. One is to give you an overview of the Topeka Asset Management System, where we are, what we have done for the past couple of years. And as part of that, the next component is the Bridge Management Program. So we just started working on developing that program. So this is the first presentation on the Bridge Management Program. So before going into the details of the systems, I keep on using some terms, so it's better to define them up front. So as per ISO 55000, assets are something of potential value to the organization, and for which an organization has some maintenance, rehabilitation, or reconstruction responsibility. It can be a municipality-owned asset, or it can be contributed assets constructed by the developers and then handed over to the city for maintenance and rehabilitation. So all those assets come under the asset management program. Asset systems are you can say it's the water supply system or a street system and a stormwater system, where a group of similar characteristics of assets interact with each other to perform the intended service. The asset management is a set of coordinated activities which the organization actually take to realize maximum value from their assets, and those activities can be best practices, it can be information systems, it can be process improvements, it can be maintenance and rehabilitation of activities. The asset management system is per the ISO 55000 standard. It's the management systems for asset management. And those management system includes all the policies, procedures, best practices, information systems. But the software component is just one piece of this whole system. So I would say not more than 5%. The next is the bridge. Everybody knows about the definition of the bridge and the culvert, but it's good to have it here, like what engineering is actually looking after. So that's why I just incorporated it over here. So any structure that is constructed on a depression or an obstruction for carrying traffic or moving load from one end to the other end. and the opening size from one end of the abutment to the other side along the center line of the road should be more than 20 feet. That's the main point, the difference. The culverts are, on the other hand, are hydraulic structures constructed to increase the hydraulic capacity of the stormwater management systems. So as per H2, if you see all those culverts, the span of which is more than 20 feet, so it includes multi-cell, single-cell culverts, but if the span is more than 20 feet, then it is a bridge length culverts. So that's where engineering is responsible for. So anything below 20 feet span length, it's the stormwater management is responsible for that, but we are not looking after that. So there's actually, there's one difference. Secondly, all those pipe culverts are also come under the bridge length culverts, which has an opening size of less than or equal to half of the opening size. So if the opening size are less than the opening size, between the spacing between the two pipes, then in that case, like that, multiple pipe culvert is termed as a bridge length culvert. So we are just looking after those culverts and bridges, the span of which is more than 20 feet. So the next definition is condition rating. So as per the national inspection standards, bridge inspection standards, they are using condition rating is to assess the condition of bridges compared to the build condition, as build condition. So the whole inspection standard is divided into a number of items, and those items, 58, is related to how inspectors or cities or states should assess the condition of the deck, the superstructure, substructure, channel and channel protection, and culverts. So the condition rating is from 0 to 9, where 0 is a failed and 9 is excellent. If you see to the right to the image, so the top slab is the deck, and the red structure is the girders and beams or the superstructure, and then the rest under that is the superstructure. So the reason I was just putting that condition rating over here is because our biennial condition assessments is done in accordance with those ratings. And then we transform those 9 ratings into 5, good, very good, poor, fair. So that's just to make it consistent across the organization. Next. This is our Topeka asset management system. So we have 6 components of this system, and it includes in phase 1 we have done the maturity, like where we are with respect to asset management, and we developed that report, and we identified our strengths and weaknesses, and based on that we have developed our roadmap. So that component is complete. Second is the asset management policy, so we have completed that as well. The third is the strategic asset management plan, so we have completed that step as well. So as part of the strategic asset management plan, we have developed comprehensive asset management activities in line with the organizational objectives and goals, and set a time frame on that. The fourth step is the asset management plan, and I would say this is the core piece of the Topeka asset management system, and I would say approximately 65 to 70% of the whole system is this one block. Item number 4 is 5 step is the implementation of asset management plan. So where we will be defining the red ones, we have not yet started work on that. But under those 2 items, under the implementation, we will be defining the governance structure and the roles and responsibilities of various actors, like how, by whom, and when this system is to be implemented. As part of the system, we are covering those 8 service areas. So initially, I started working on all the 8 areas simultaneously, and somehow on each area we have completed around 15 to 20% work. But later on, the decision came in to focus on street because we had a problem with the street. So just go ahead with the street and complete the street program. So on street side, asset management strategy, the level of service frameworks and the benchmarks and the measures and everything is complete for streets. But the infrastructure report card, it's still, I have to work on that. So hopefully all the 3 together will be a asset management plan, and hopefully in the next 2 to 3 months, the street asset management plan we should complete. This is the process. It was not there, and we just started as a team working on developing this infrastructure planning process. As part of that process, the first step is to update our inventory. And this is just a single step, but we have developed a comprehensive SOP for how, when, by whom, what frequency. And we just laid it down explicitly for utilities and for Public Works Department, like how it is to be done. The second step is to assess the condition. A comprehensive SOP is developed for the asset condition assessment. And then once both of them are done, then we have to update our systems, which are CityWorks and the GIS system. The data is exported to Aesthetic. So we are keep on talking for a year or so, I would say, on the Aesthetic model. So Brian was of the view that we should have to put something like to give you the actual results. So in the next meeting, hopefully, we will give you some output of the street model. So in that step, we calibrate our Aesthetic model, and then we run the model to generate the maintenance and rehabilitation reports. We share that with street department to identify the street project for the next CIP. So there's a very abstract project. The next slide is just the details of that, that process. Can you move on to the next slide? So this is the same process, but just to give you an overview that this is the detailed process, and we are connecting that process with all other sub-processes wherever it is required. So next step. Now I come to the bridge management program updates. So as part of that, if you see the top one is one of the, I would say, the table. I'm just getting it ready for the infrastructure report card for the bridge, component. So from the asset management perspective, the bridge-focused group divided bridges into 4 components, or 4 major categories. One is the bridge length culverts, so the top are actually culverts. Second is reinforced concrete bridges with superstructure, with reinforced concrete superstructure. And the bottom 2 are the reinforced decks with the superstructure in steel. The useful life for all the 4 components are from 80 to 100 years. And the inventory you can see is altogether is 101. So we are just looking after 101 bridges. From the asset management perspective and the asset valuation, so what is the worth of our asset? So if you multiply the number of units with the unit cost, so our bridge component is almost $198 million. So this is what we are preparing and what you will see in the asset management plan once it is developed for the bridge management. The bottom 2 is the urban arterial bridges and off-system bridges. So this is one of the requirements under the National Bridge Inspection Standards. So all the reports, the condition assessment reports, which is done biennially after 2 years, and all the reports are generated based on those two categories. So that's why I just put that classification as well over here. So urban arterials, in 2014, the city of Topeka identified those urban arterials, and subsequently that was approved by FHA, the Federal Highway Administration, and Kansas Department of Transportation. And so as per those classification, we have 64 urban arterial bridges, and then we have the off-system bridges, which is on local streets. So the total is 101 again. And the next slide is the inventory. So we just created this map, and you can see the reds are the bridge length culverts. So we have 52, and the bridges are 49 in blue icons. This one is condition assessment and inventory management all together, and this is for the urban arterial. So you can see we have most of our bridges in good and excellent condition. We have 7 of the total 7 bridges are fair, and one bridge is in poor state. You can see the bridges are assessed from a 0 to 9 category ratings, but we are showing over here is just 5, and this just we want to keep it consistent across the organization for all our assets. Next slide shows the off-system bridges. Same, we have just one bridge on the off-system which is in poor state. This is, we just created these two graphs for the bridge inspection. So in 2017 data and in 2019, we slightly improved the good. It moved to very good, so 2% increase in the excellent bridges. And the fair and poor almost are 7 bridges fair and 1 bridge is poor, and it's keep the same. This is the bridge condition ratings. So if you can see on the arterial, so we are slightly improving the condition on the urban arterial bridges from 7.9 to 8, and the off system are slightly decreased from 8.4 to 8.3, but overall the bridge condition rating is increased from 8 to 8.1. The overall is from 0 and 9 is the excellent, so we are in a very good state. The present process for identification of project is very reactive. Like every 2 years, as per requirements, people go out, we have project, consultants are engaged, and they do the condition assessment, and then they define the treatments. Okay, what we need to be doing, but based on what has happened. So they identify maintenance and minor and major rehabilitation and even reconstruction project. We want to transform this process to a more proactive, so that at least in the future we know when our bridges major rehabilitation is to be taking place at least next 20 years, and then how much we need for that, and like at least the city should know upfront like what our next 20-year plan is with respect to bridges. So that's why we have just want to use the ascetic model, long-term planning. So in the next slide is, this is our proactive approach. So we want to use the ascetic model for the project identification and prioritization. As part of that, we are using a service criteria as the main decision-making paradigm, where we are using, and so far in the brainstorming sessions, we are using the condition rating. We will make all our decisions based on the condition rating, because the condition assessment is done from a 0 to 9 scale, and that's how we will be making our decision based on the condition ratings. The treatment trigger criteria we are using so far too. So where the bridge is located, whether this is an urban arterial or it's an off system, So it depends on the type of road, whether it's an arterial road or a local road. And then the other is the bridge type, whether it's a steel or a reinforced concrete bridge or what type of bridge is that. Then we will run the scenario analysis. So as part of that, what we have done for street is we are running the model for 100 years. So this is one of the constraints, and we are running on 20 years for 40 years. So that's, you can, whatever you feel like, you can do that. Second is the budgetary constraints. So we ran the model for the streets, I'm saying. So like this, how just giving you an example. So we ran for different budget scenario, unlimited budget scenario, and then for 24 million and $10 million. So based on those, we will run the scenario analysis and do the optimization. And then we will develop a capital works program where we will be identifying the treatment types, the costs, and the schedule when everything is to be done. And then we will move on this capital work program to the GIS system, so where everybody can see which year, what treatment is to be done to which bridge, and what should be the cost and schedule. In the next slide, we are just showing a very preliminary treatment strategy that we want to model in the aesthetic model. So I don't know you can see or not, but the overall strategy is that once the condition of the bridge is around 7, then at that we need the first maintenance on that. And when it goes up to 8. When it comes down to 6 again, then we need some sort of deck patching, and it will bump it to 7. Then in the next, when it comes down to 4, then at that time we will be doing the deck mill and overlay. It will take it back to 8, and then in the next 4 cycles we will be just doing the superstructure replacement and the full bridge replacement. So the difference we are keeping right now between the urban arterials and the local system is just the thresholds. So in the next slide, if you can see, the only difference is we are just replacing the bridge deck and superstructure replacement when the bridge hits the trigger value of 3. On the culvert side, so far we don't have a specific criteria for that, but so far what we are thinking is over the life cycle of the culvert, first we will have a maintenance when it hits 4, and it will bump it up to 8. When it come back to 4, then we will have a second maintenance, and it will come to 6. And from the 6, when it come down to 3, at that time we will replace our culvert. So this is some of the strategy. We will model this in the aesthetic. This is my last slide, but the committee wants to see something tangible. So in the next meeting, hopefully you will see the results. We are making that analysis. And in the next meeting, you will see like how this aesthetic model works and what the different scenarios are and what the maintenance and rehabilitation alternatives is. So on the same line, we are developing the same thing for the bridge program.
All right, thanks for that presentation. Just to be clear, any bridge, any culvert that's under 20 feet is maintained by stormwater, is that correct?
Yes.
Anything over is maintained by engineering?
By engineering, yes.
All right. Do you have a competent guy working out in the field on the bridges? Just a question. Yeah, I can't think of a better person to be out there, by the way. Greg's been on top of things for a lot of years. So city's in good hands. And by the way, the fact that only 8 out of 101 bridges are not good or very good, there's not a lot of cities that can point to that, I don't think. I assume the the bridge that's in poor condition, can you tell me where that's at, by the way? So, no, I'm just kidding. I assume that's on the list for repairs pretty quickly, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. Any other questions? Councilman Emerson, Councilman Lesser? All right, I failed to mention that we do have Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala on and Councilwoman Ortiz. So any questions from anybody else on the call? All right, very good. We'll look forward to next month. And I think we are ready for fleet leasing at this point. City manager or Hannah?
So, can you hear me, first of all? Is my microphone fine? Yes, no news is good news.
You're a bit hard to understand, but
Okay, I'll try to talk into it more and louder. So can you hear me now? No, the PowerPoint.
yeah, a little bit better.
That one, thank you. So over the last several infrastructure meetings, we've been talking about different aspects of our fleet replacement policy and trying to create a program that's comprehensive by nature and really addresses all of our assets that are in our very wide-ranging fleet. So today we're going to provide a quick overview as well as open it up to Ken, who is with Enterprise, to speak a little bit more about the lease model that they have with Enterprise and what we've been discussing. So to just start it off, recap from one of our first presentations, the city's fleets are assets that are critical to and that departments depend on to deliver services to the community. We know that these tools are critical in terms of you can't fix a road, you can't go out and inspect a bridge, you can't really do much of our essential services, including community engagement, without reliable transportation. Our fleet consists of equipment ranging from everything from snow plows to sewer maintenance trucks, road pavement, police, and fire vehicles. And these are just the assets that are over $5,000. We also maintain snow blowers and lawn mowers and weed eaters and anything that essentially has a mower or needs to be welded. The Topeka's fleet consists of more than 1,000 vehicles and equipment and have a replacement value of $54 million. So in aggregate, this is a very expensive asset that the city has to maintain. The challenge that we have today with the city's fleet is very similar to a large number of assets that we've discussed where they're largely past their recommended life cycle. 44% of our assets are currently at or beyond their useful life. 7% of these, or 58, are more than 10 years past the recommended replacement cycle. As a result, we have higher operational costs, decreased liability, and increased downtime. So some of our fleet, based on this, is repetitive. We have to have backups because we know we have an unreliable front line. Our fleet services department, as we've discussed, has turned into more of a repair shop than a PM shop, which by industry standards is not where we want to be as a city or as an organization. So to continue to support the city's department in delivering services to the community, we need to come up with a strong fleet management program that spans all vehicles and equipment. The continued trade-off between our short-term budgetary savings and our long-term cost of ownership on vehicles isn't something the city can continue to sustain. It's much easier to look at and think about stuff on a fiscal year, as we typically do when we get into our budget meetings and our capital repair programs. But the total cost of ownership for these assets is critical in looking at the sustainable future of our fleet. So the fleet replacement program that we're going to discuss has been presented, is a hybrid of 3 different approaches based on asset type. So the first is the lease program for our light and mid-duty vehicles with limited upfitting. That will have Enterprise go over here in a little bit. A dedicated bond-funded heavy-duty program. Currently, fire and trans ops have a approved CIP line for these items. And then a cash program for the balance of the assets. So the ideal program cost effectiveness really would be a cash-based program. Realistically, with the current financial situation of the city, we're not at a place where we could sustain and fund consistently the needs of the full fleet. With that, the dedicated bond funds, to kind of refresh, would be included with the current bond policy of $125,000 or more and have a 10-year life. As you can see in the table on the second line, the assets that we have recommended for this program have an average value of $200,000. The cash program would require a consistent annual payment into a sinking fund that would allow for the purchase of these new assets. This would need to be adjusted annually based on inflation, but would be relatively flat and easy to maintain from a budgetary perspective. The average value of these is about $45,000 a piece in comparison to the leased program, which is $27,000. So you can see by just the value alone that these assets have a very dramatically different use. So they're not what we would think of as our personal fleet. That's closer to what the lease program would represent. So currently in the 2021 approved budget on the funding sources, we have approximately $4.7 million allocated to fleet replacement. 40% of which, or $1.9 million, is funded out of operational budgets. This is really driven by PD, utilities, and the departments that are currently participating in the VERF program. The graph you see here have approved funding by year, starting in 21 out to 2030, looking over a 10-year horizon. There are some assumptions made starting in 2026 that the approved funding maintains relatively consistent as we move forward, but has a definite deficit, as you can see, with only $50 million being funded over a 10-year period, when the value of our current fleet is $54 million. So in looking at this graph, and there's a lot of numbers again, you can see that there's a very large red bar in 2021. This catch-up year, or essentially catch-all for all the vehicles that are currently past their useful life, or the 387 assets we mentioned earlier, is about $15 million. Excluding that year on the catch-up year, we have an average deficit of $1.1 million to maintain our current life of our fleet. So if we were to hold flat with an average number of years of 9.5 years, we would have to maintain $1.1 million more than what we currently have allocated in our budget. To improve the health of our fleet, we would need to not only meet the annual gap of 1.1, but also fulfill the full $25.9 million funding gap over the next 10 years. If we add a lease program in, which is what we've been talking about over the last several meetings, by adding that program in, we actually decrease the overall gap to $16 million from 25, and our annual deficit down to $444,000 a year. This gap does not factor in the reduction in maintenance or fuel economy that we would receive from having a newer fleet, but very much a much more realistic picture of what the city could achieve from a year-to-year fluctuation. So as mentioned before, over the last several months, we've been working with Enterprise to understand the value and costing of entering into a lease program. So we'll let Enterprise share their model with us here in a few minutes once we kind of wrap up what the cost of a lease program would be in terms of the cost of exit, so that you can ask all the applicable questions. So the model that we've discussed up to this point has had Enterprise recommending 100 assets for year one replacement. We'll go over what those assets are and how they came up with that number in a few, but just to give you a baseline in terms of the risk factor that we've discussed previously on the cost of exit, if we were to want to exit after year one for those 100 vehicles, we would have three options. Option one would be to purchase the vehicle for the remainder of the balance owed to Enterprise, which is $2.2 million. Option two is allow Enterprise to sell the 100 vehicles for us, and then use cash purchase to replace those vehicles, which would give us about $1.9 million cash out of pocket. This is with the assumption that Enterprise's model does replace at the ideal time for resale, which would give us that equity back and reduce our cost to purchase new. Option 3 is to extend the lease terms until the book value is paid off, which over the course of the 72-month period it would take to do that would cost us approximately $3 million. This could be iterated at any point within the lease program, meaning if after year 1 we go into year 2 and expand to 200 vehicles versus 100, this would just double in terms of the magnitude to the budget that the city would have to come up with to exit the program at the time. Yes, sir.
Chair, do you mind if I ask a question?
Go ahead, Councilman.
Thank you for this. I guess my one question, one option I don't see here is continuing a lease, doing another lease at the end of this. Is that?
Yes, Enterprise will go through that model.
Okay.
That will show the cost of that. I just wanted, before we get into their model that does show a value equation that's very positive, to make sure that you guys saw the impacts if we so chose to exit.
All right, thanks.
No problem. So what I'm really looking for at the end of this, and we'll circle back to this slide once Enterprise is given their presentation, is feedback from this committee on the 3 program approaches. So the lease program with Enterprise as an example, the cash or the dedicated bond funded program, and the cash sinking fund. And wanted to get from this body and looking forward, what targets overall would the city want to establish for the fleet asset lifecycle tolerance? Meaning, how many years are we okay with us being behind? And what would we want to achieve as a city as we look forward? And what would be the timeline desire to hit this target, so that we could discuss the full program and what it would take to get us there? Any questions before I turn it over to Ken at Enterprise? And I know it very fast, so please stop me if there are any.
I have no questions. Any questions from anybody online?
No, sir.
Thank you, Councilman.
So with that, I'll turn it over to Ken Olson with Enterprise, and he can go over the cost of their model, which is reflected in these documents that I presented, and answer any questions you have about their program.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much for having me today, and thank you, Hannah, and the entire team. I see a lot of names on here that we've worked with for quite some time now, so really appreciate that and all the efforts that you've put in. I wanted to break the segment into really 4 different categories. I want to give you a high-level overview of our program and kind of the structure and strategy that we have with most of our clients. Talk about a few other entities and some of the flexibilities of our program and how we can design models. And then get into the financial components, and then answer any questions that you have. So from a high-level perspective, we are the same company as Enterprise Holdings. Likely all of you are familiar with our Enterprise Rent-A-Car company. On our side, the fleet management side, we really just leverage all of the tools, the resources, all of the people that we have from operating the largest fleet in the country with all of our rental vehicles and our fleet management vehicles to help entities like yourself with medium-sized fleets. We help you to save some money and bring some efficiencies throughout this program, which I can walk you here through in just a moment. My role is really getting the partnerships established. So analyzing with the team what you're currently doing, building out the financial model, and really getting the partnership in place, and hopefully in design from a structure standpoint over the next 10 years on out, right? So a very long-term partnership. Once the partnership is established and we have everything rolled through, we go through board, get contracts in place, and the program's off and running, my team will come out on a local basis and meet with you typically about 3 to 5 times a year. My local group here, we cover all of Kansas and about half of Missouri, and our account teams will come out and meet with our various clients on a very regular basis, analyzing what we did over the past year to show the savings that we brought, and forecast out with your team and around your budget timeline to help you guys get that budget in place and continuously analyze to make sure we're bringing those efficiencies and savings to play. To walk you through a couple of the different entities, City of Independence here locally, Unified Government, Shawnee County, all three of those entities only use us for what I consider the depreciation side. So they acquire the vehicles and have the vehicles upfitted through us. We get them delivered. They use our equity lease funding model that is built into the models that have been provided and we'll talk about here in a moment. And then they sell the vehicles through us. All three of those entities, like yourself, are fairly large and they have plenty of service technicians and on-site fueling, so they do not utilize our program for the fuel, the maintenance, telematics, insurance, etc. A few of our other entities I partnered with, Lake of the Ozarks and the City of Branson, a little bit smaller sized entities. They use us for absolutely everything on the operational side as well. But to get into the financial program and really why this program works so well for our government clients is you all buy these vehicles better than anyone, right? And being a government entity, you have extremely strong buying power and you get very strong incentives. We leverage that piece along with how well we sell vehicles being enterprise. We sell about 1.1 million vehicles last year, and we sell them extremely well. The same folks that are selling all of our rental vehicles are also selling your fleet vehicles. So we leverage that buying power that you have being a government client, and then we leverage our selling abilities, and then we built a financial model that allows you to just pay for the portion that you're going to use. So we are looking at a bunch of Traverse SUVs, half-ton and three-quarter-ton pickup trucks, and a lot of these vehicles will be ran on a one-year cycle. And just to put the numbers from a very high-level perspective, from a retail perspective, the invoice cost of that vehicle for a half-ton pickup would be about $32,000. You being a government entity, buy that vehicle for $22,000. We take that $22,000 and we fund it down to around $19,000, and then we sell that vehicle for about $27,000 on your behalf. So you pay around $5,000 and you get a check back for $9,000. So the reason our government clients are leveraging this is it's extremely beneficial from a budget perspective. They leverage the equity out of the current fleet today. They get into this leasing model. They pay for a year down the road, and then they get a check back to offset that balance. So a lot of our government clients are reinvesting the equity that they're getting out of these vehicles and putting them back into the next vehicle, therefore implementing a newer, more efficient fleet of vehicles. In the analysis that we've built, we really broke it into a few different categories. And really at the end of the day, it's emergency vehicles for the police style units, and then there's the non-emergency style vehicles. There's a department, crime investigations, with the police team falls more into the non-emergency, but on that non-emergency side vehicles, there's a segment of 229 vehicles that over the course of 10 years, the total savings aspect is right around $4.1 million. And that's from taking our current cycle down to about a 1 or a 2 year cycle over those 10 years. And then on the crime investigations, there's another $1 million in savings as well. So a huge savings opportunity along with implementing that newer, more the more efficient fleet. And from the team's perspective, it doesn't sound like we're going to leverage this program for the maintenance or for the fuel side. But at the end of the day, by implementing this type of a structure, your operating expenses with your fuel maintenance are going to be drastically decreased, which is also built into the modeling as well. So with all that being said, I'd like to take some time to answer some questions on any of the different areas of the program.
Any questions? Councilman Emerson, none. Councilman Lesser?
No, sir.
Councilwoman Ortiz or Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala? Councilwoman
I'm
Ortiz?
good, Neil, thanks.
All right. Councilwoman Ortiz?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to know, I know the state does this. Do you have a one size fits all, or is the state different from the city or different entities? How does that work?
Yeah, so great question. Our program is very customizable, and for each of the various departments and what they're utilizing that vehicle for, we will customize the strategy for that department. For example, our police units will be ran at more of a 48-month term, typically, putting on much greater mileage patterns, higher idle times, a ton of equipment going on those vehicles, versus some of these public works units that we're operating at a 12-month term, right? And each vehicle will have its own structure. And really us being local and coming out and meeting with you on a continuous basis is how we continuously analyze that structure. And we're always going to bring the recommendation to play. Hannah mentioned earlier, we've got a lot of flexibility in how we operate, to whether it's a one-year lease and then we bring in a new vehicle and get into another lease, or we extend that lease out, or you all buy that vehicle out. Tons of flexibility, and it's absolutely not a cookie cutter type approach.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I do have a couple of questions, I guess. Does it make a difference in the type of equipment that's put on the vehicles? I mean, if you're drilling holes into it to put light bars on, things like that, does that affect the resale value?
Yeah, great question. So it depends on the given vehicle, right? So if we're doing a 350 flatbed or a medium duty style unit with a bed on the back or such, we're going to extend that vehicle out quite a bit longer. It would be similar to that police model. We'll typically run those vehicles about 60 months. As for some of the light duty equipment, to give you an example, the Unified Government, they do all their street trucks through me, and they put a snowplow mount on, a snowplow, light bar, toolbox, and they still flip the trucks every year. There is an additional cost to adding that equipment, but they sell the unit as is and just flip the snowplow from truck to truck, and they're still feeling the benefit of getting the equity out sooner. But you're absolutely spot on. There's going to be a different model for each given vehicle. And I'm working with Brian and Hannah and the entire team to customize that strategy as we go.
Great. Thank you. I guess maybe this one's for Hannah. Have we looked at the cost of maintenance through Enterprise versus what we do?
We did. I guess I pushed it up. We did, and in one of the documents that was attached to this is the cost that Enterprise has for their maintenance program. In looking at that, while I'm sure it's great if you don't have your own internal fleet, given that it's just PM work that would be expected to happen during that time frame, we're much cheaper than multiplying out their maintenance over the course of a year or two.
Great, thank you. That's all the questions, I think.
So oh, sorry, Ken. One thing, could you pull up the model that you have, the fleet synopsis, and kind of walk the group through the annual expense, just to kind of showcase and ask any of the questions on the specific numbers for how you are recommending we approach a lease program? Yeah, that one.
Absolutely. And we've broken, as I mentioned, we've broken this down into 3 different categories. So this is the non-emergency segment on page 3. Page 4, we have the police department in full with their 210 units. And then down here, we have crime investigation. So for the non-emergency style fleet, we broke this down into a couple different documents, but at the end of the day, we're focusing on 229 units in that segment of the fleet here. These are the various different classes that you have in the fleet today. Through conversations with the team, we're going to work to standardize the fleet from a class perspective as much as possible, and also right type the fleet. A lot of times with some of our departments, vehicles get passed down and they might not be the optimal vehicle. That's one of the things that we're going to do through this program is right type and right size your entire fleet. And that will continuously grow as the partnership develops. Currently, you have 229 vehicles. These are the different types that you have. In this 229 vehicle segment, the average age is 10 years of age. The average annual mileage is 5,900. This is another component that is why this program fits so well. You buy the vehicles better than anyone, we sell them better than anyone, and you put extremely low mileage patterns on versus a commercial or retail type structure. Through our replacement criteria here up in this segment, we broke it out into an implementation model over the next 5 years. We've also taken out a few vehicles that are underutilized in this model already. And then we've got the different classes. And as you can see, we have a ton of trucks, SUVs, and HD pickups as well, which play very, very nicely into this modeling. The additional, Hannah mentioned earlier, there's 100 units that we're recommending year one. The other 19 come from the Crime Investigations Department, which is not included in this model. We broke that out down below, which I'll show you in a moment. In this graph here, you'll see that 111 vehicles are over 10 years of age, and we have a substantial amount, 28, that are over 20 years of age, right? And from that perspective, with this segment of the fleet here, there's a lot of safety concerns and some efficiency pieces that are not being made. And really, at the end of the day, even if this model was completely break even, and we could shift all of these units into the first few years at a $0 savings aspect, Enterprise would absolutely make that recommendation. Through this modeling, as you can see, there's a substantial savings opportunity by implementing this model. So this is the fleet analysis portion, and the average line here is trying to show historically what we've done over the past years with our current budget today. So we've got 229 vehicles in the fleet. On average, with this segment, we're acquiring about 15 vehicles. We own and pay cash for all of those units currently. We have no vehicles through the Enterprise program. And our cash outlay for those 15 vehicles is right around $395,000. The lease cost, there's no lease cost through Enterprise. And we're getting something from those 15 vehicles, the oldest vehicles that we're selling for that given year. The maintenance cost, based upon the criteria that's built in the model, is at $332,000, and the fuel expense, based upon the age and types of vehicles we're running, is at $243,000. If we combine all four of these numbers here, that gives us our current fleet budget of $940,000. So again, that's trying to show what you're currently doing today. As we get into the Enterprise model for this first year here, we dropped it. We removed those underutilized units. So now we're at 221 vehicles. We're recommending you acquire 81 units from Enterprise year one in this segment. We still own 140 units. We have 81 vehicles from Enterprise. There's no cash outlay from a purchase perspective. We have a lease expense for those 81 units at $470,000. The equity from those 81 units coming back is at $386,000. And then we are going to sell a portion of these units after 1 year for $368,000. So that is realized in this year one budget calculation. Our maintenance is a mixed number because we have 140 units that we currently own, and we have 81 vehicles from Enterprise. So that is, again, a mixed component. And our fuel starts to decrease over the years with better fuel, more fuel efficient vehicles. We've discussed adding hybrids and electric vehicles over the years as we get there, but our fuel costs will certainly be decreased over the years. So our fleet budget for year one is at $182,000. If we look at the current budget less the year one budget, there's a savings aspect of $758,000. If we add all of these years as we go over the 10 years, there's a $4.1 million savings opportunity there. With the same analysis on the Crime Investigations Department, there's a $1 million savings aspect with their 38 units there. A lot of numbers, went through it fairly quick. Any areas that you would like to highlight here or have questions on?
Any questions? Councilman Emerson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I guess these aren't in our packet, are they, these slides? Or?
Yes, they
Okay.
were in the attached, yeah.
Okay, they're in the email. Okay,
Yep.
Thank you. Good.
Councilman Lesser.
No, I do not.
All right. Yeah, let me walk back through this. It is a lot of numbers and a lot of information, and we hit this once a month or once every 2 months, so it takes a little bit to get up to speed. So if what you are proposing in general at this point is a 3-tiered, we'd lease some vehicles, 221 ultimately. We'd have, our larger vehicles would remain in the CIP, and then we're cash funding, continuing to cash fund some of the vehicles. What vehicles are we cash funding in general?
In general, there'll be the PD patrol vehicles.
Okay.
There'll be the highly specialized street and engineering kind of trucks that kind of meet that threshold of not quite 125, but also highly outfitted.
Okay.
Which, as we get into it, if we find that some of those highly outfitted could be sold as is to another municipality or something, we could look to explore that as we get more into it. But they're really those ones that are kind of in that middle 45, 50,000 range that don't fit either model.
Okay. That makes sense to me. I think we're talking then small to mid-sized sedans and pickup trucks. Just walk through in simple numbers. So year one, I get year 0. That's what we own, highlighted by the orange line. We spend some number at the end that I can't quite see because this is really, really small.
What are you looking at?
The average, I guess it says average, yellow line right there. What does the city spend every year right now? Net cash, is that what we?
So this one's based on Enterprise's assumption of maintenance and fuel cost.
Right.
Based on the age of vehicles. So it's showing that we spend $945,000 annually.
That's our fleet budget.
Yep.
So we're actually spending those dollars right now.
That doesn't tie to ours, but yeah, more or less.
Okay. Year one, we buy 81 vehicles, or we lease 81 vehicles. How much are we spending overall in year one?
So the equity coming out of the fleet today in those 81 units that we're replacing is at 386,500 there. So that would be given back to us up front as soon as we sell those units.
Okay.
The new vehicles are delivered. We sell those 81 on your behalf and give that equity back to you. You would then go into a monthly payment, and for the next 12 months, that monthly expense would be $470,535. And then at the end of the 1 year, we would sell a majority of those 81 vehicles and return a check of equity back to you of $368,000. So from a cash flow perspective, it's really broken into 3 different buckets. But from just a cash outlay and in our budget without any equity coming back whatsoever, our lease cost for those 81 units would be $470,535.
Okay, but taking all that into account, if our budget right now is $940,000, under this scenario, after we sell the 81 vehicles, start making lease payments, you resell some of those vehicles at the end of the year, it looks like year one, our actual payment is $181,000. I understand this is comprised of a number of different buckets, but gets up to $464, maybe $541, never reaches the $940 that we're spending right now. Is that a fair
That is what the model
characterization?
Will show. In that maintenance cost in particular, there's some overhead, and we know that with an internal maintenance program, it's not necessarily one for one.
Right.
Based on their model, which is comprised of industry standard kind of assumptions, it essentially costs double to maintain a 10-year-old vehicle than a 1-year-old vehicle. So it is fair to say that if we were to embrace this, we would see a decrease in our operational costs on those assets and potentially a reduced need and demand in our internal fleet division that we could realize over time.
Very good. All right. That answers my questions.
So with that was Enterprise's deck and what their model is projecting. There is the attachments that are included in, so if you have any additional questions, once you review it more, let me know. But I do want to kind of circle back to pose again the questions that I asked at the end of my presentation, which essentially was guidance from this body in terms of what you feel about the three approaches, knowing that the cash sinking in particular would require an investment on our part as a city from an operational budget standpoint. The lease program, because that is not something that we could sustain or fund from a bonded program, so we would have to realize that through a lease that would capitalize or be in our operational budget, and the cash today is not necessarily equitable by department, so we'd have to understand what that would mean from a citywide perspective and what the directive is. And then if you wish us to continue to explore the lease program for the city moving forward, looking forward to the next month's meeting, I would like to establish a target in terms of where we see our fleet going, and as a city, what we want to commit to, in terms of the health of our overall fleet and how we can get there.
I guess I'd look for comments from the committee. Councilman Emerson?
Sure, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I really like these numbers I'm seeing. I mean, I would think there's some point, I mean, right now, there's kind of almost an aberration in the market, right, where at the price we can buy it, the resale is so high relative to the price we can buy it that they're making these work. I understand there might be some point in the future when that's not the case, right? If every government in the U.S. starts to do this, if every city government, in a couple of years, there's going to be, 1 million trucks available for sale. So it's something that may not work forever, but I'd say let's ride it while we can and save some money. So I would be in favor of going forward with maybe finalizing the leasing details.
Okay. Awesome. And that is one that, Enterprise does provide support for. So if we find in a year or two as we're into the program that that's not the appropriate model to do 1 year in and out, we can at that point renegotiate the terms of those particular leases and extend them out to an appropriate term. So it does provide us that flexibility as we move forward to adjust as the market does.
Yeah, but I guess, kind of following up on what Councilman Dobler said, even once we get up to 221 ultimately through this lease, we're still spending less than half of what we currently do. So yes, that is definitely their model, and it would definitely help reduce our maintenance cost as the average age of our fleet is, 10 years old. So get us into newer, more reliable vehicles. Great. Thank you. That's all I had, Chair.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Lesser, any thoughts?
No, it's hard. Like I said, it's hard to get all the information, so I'll review it, but I think I'm good.
Okay. Just a couple of questions. Finance and legal, when do they step into the picture? Have they already reviewed this?
Yep. They've already been reviewing. Legal is working through just to make sure from a contractual standpoint there's nothing that is a deal stopper. And at this point, they feel confident that they're able to work through the remaining pieces to make it something that the city could do. Finance has been definitely in on this. And I won't speak on their behalf. I'll let Jessica speak to their perspectives, but we have kept them in the loop in terms of understanding the risks that are associated with this, because at any point, if we did choose to exit a lease program, there's a large financial commitment on the part of the city that we'd have to be prepared to do. But going into it, it is something that they have definitely been part of.
All right. Does this require a RFP of any sort, or is this, can we sole source this, or how does it work with Enterprise?
Enterprise is currently on the Sourcewell contract. That contract has been vetted as an opportunity for us to piggyback if we so chose to. We are currently just evaluating a couple other options to make sure that we feel that this is the appropriate direction forward, and should have a clear line within the next few weeks.
Okay. All right. Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala or Councilwoman Ortiz, any questions or comments? Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I guess we'll need to figure out how many years we want to do this so we don't get penalized. Is that what I'm hearing?
No, ma'am. So we're able to do it for as long of a term as we want to commit to. There's no penalty to exit. The risk of exit is really just in the financial obligation of the city in terms of purchasing the assets. So the example that we gave in the deck was the 100 vehicles year one. At the end of year one, we can choose to end our agreement with Enterprise and sell those assets. And at that point, we'd have to purchase new ones since we would still need the 100 vehicles to maintain operations. But there's no cost to exit the lease program from Enterprise's perspective at any point. It's just a matter of the city committing the capital dollars to make sure that we have enough vehicles to sustain. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
To answer it?
Yes, it makes more sense. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Chair, I would just say that from what I can hear, it sounds like there would definitely be some investment savings with going with Enterprise. I think I'm like Mike too, and that I would need to review the meeting afterwards, you know, to get some more clarity on some of the figures. But it's from what I can hear, it definitely sounds like something that we should invest in.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I guess I'd ask City Manager to make sure the deck and the additional information get sent out to the entire council. Thank you. All right, I think for next meeting, it'd be great if we had a discussion from finance and legal. And then if we could, I think we've got the detail at this point. If we could simplify the information, I'd like to understand, number one, if we do this approach, what's the ask from a budget standpoint for 2022 and on, if there is one? You know, what's it going to take to bring our fleet up to speed in the cash portion of it, the police vehicles, the CIP, the whole pro forma really for that. Anything else? All right, I think we're good. Thank you to Ken, I believe. Good presentation. And I think we're ready to move on to street sweeping. Can we lease street sweepers?
All right, good afternoon. Yes, we're here to talk about the street sweeping, the RFP that was sent out.
Hey, excuse me, you might introduce yourself just right off the bat.
All right, I'm Tony Trower. I'm the acting interim deputy director at the current time. I have Todd Workman with me as well. So when these bids came in, I got to looking at them. We had 3 bids that came in, and the one was from a local vendor, Bettis, which was just a line item. They just have one sweeper, so it wasn't really a bid. But I got to looking at the numbers, and so I got Todd involved along with our office manager, computer analyst, and I wanted some actual data and numbers of what we were doing. What we had, I just didn't think it was right. So we went through it, so I asked those to help me out. So I'm going to turn some of it over to Todd. We'll kind of go back and forth here and talk about this. So,
good afternoon. Tony did task me with looking over the RFP, kind of fleshing it out, seeing what our costs were as opposed to the bids. At the end of the day, what had to happen was the maintenance costs of our sweepers would have to exceed the amount of one of the bids in order to make it practical. The bids came in at $110,000 and $125,000. When I analyzed the actual costs and faster for the 3 sweepers and the flush truck that compose our sweeping fleet, the annual costs were a little over $44,000 for the maintenance of the sweepers. There's no cost savings on the labor side because they'd just be retasked. We would still use the dump trucks that we use for the sweep crew and other tasks also. So it came down to maintenance costs by itself. And also, we weren't going to dispose of the sweeping crew. The night crew would still be sweeping just as much as they always did. So the only thing I could really do was cut half the maintenance costs off to come up with the cost recovery. And that would be a little over $24,000. And so at the end of the day, the contracting out the sweeping didn't seem to be the practical way or the efficient way to do things. However, what we did find during this process was that we really didn't have a standard curb mile practice in place to sweep areas. We have 11 zones inside the Topeka central downtown area that are swept. Initially, or the way it's been in the past, is they were swept twice a year. And when we looked at the curb miles and I started putting curb miles per hour to our sweepers based on the amount of days they worked, I have a chart. If you guys don't have it, I can hand these out. I don't see anything up there, but I can't hand out those charts to you. That showed that in the Potwin and the Oakland areas, our street sweeping slowed down to 0.66 miles per hour. The average for the whole city for street sweeping was 1.62 miles per hour. So obviously, the deciduous trees in the area, the Potwin and Oakland area, were really slowing us down. And just doing those areas twice a year probably wasn't doing a good service for those particular areas. And so now that we have this standard in place, and we also have a new schedule where we are going to be sweeping the areas that include Potwin and Oakland 3 times in a 130-day period as opposed to twice a year. And you can see it on this chart. Well, you could see it in that chart. 1, 8, and 9 are actually the Potwin, and the 2 Oakland areas. 8 and 9 are Oakland, 1 is Potwin. And we'll be hitting those in that 131-day period 3 times in that 131-day period in an effort to try to raise that curb mile per hour up to the 1.62 miles per hour. And we feel like that's one of the ways in which we can improve our service to the constituency. That's about as fast as I can do it.
We do have 3 sweepers that they're wore out, they're just tired. So we will we'd like to get rid of the 3 and replace it with 1. Another conversation that we had, we can put that other sweeper on another route on itself if need be, if for one of them heavier areas, they can go out themselves. Something that we did task with the sweeping, I know it's been a topic ever since I've been here. I got to talking with the supervisors once the new ones came on board, and our vac truck, so we had 6 sweepers and 3 was going out every day. So we've changed that philosophy of the way we're doing things. So the vac truck, every day that we're sweeping, that vac truck is going out on its own and doing the outer edges of Topeka is what it's used for. And so I live out off of Croco Road, and I've been there 3 years, and I know that area had not been swept. And so talking with Todd was the supervisor over the sweeping crew at that point, and talking with him, we came up with this setting up that vac truck and them going out. So they're going out every day and sweeping on their own in the outer areas. So them areas are getting hit more daily. So that's kind of all we have. If you guys have some questions.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. I just back up for a little bit, just for my, just because I don't really understand this. So right now we have 2 sweeping crews of 3 sweepers each. Is that right?
No, we have 1 sweeping crew, but there was only a flush truck, 2 dump trucks, and 2 3-wheel sweepers going out every day.
Okay.
That's what was going out. Now we've added in the vac truck, which is going out and doing the outer edges on its own because it comes and dumps. It don't have to have the flush truck or nothing. So basically we had 3 other sweepers sitting in the barn most of the time. And so the way we've seen these improvements that we can do, and this, if we had one more sweeper, we don't need to replace all the sweepers that we had. I just soon replace one, and that way we can send that out. If we need to have it go through Potwin or Oakland on its own, it can.
Okay. So I think part of the issue with outsourcing sweeping was better service, right?
Correct.
More cycles. You're saying you're looking at a way to increase the number of cycles through all neighborhoods. Is that?
Well, this is an ongoing process now that we have the curb mile. We have two constants in place. We have the zones, which are constant, and we have the amount of curb miles in each zone that's constant. The variable is how long it takes us to get through each zone. And we have a number for that variable, but we have a goal, a lower bar, a minimum goal that we want to meet, and that is 1.62. In some of the areas, it's below 1.62, especially in Potwin and Oakland, and we certainly want to get those numbers up. But I wouldn't say that we won't do other areas more than twice. It just would depend on how that flows out. But it's constantly in motion. I mean, we want to be flexible and make sure that we take care of all the streets. So
our goal is to hit the whole city twice.
Okay.
But then the areas that are heavily that we need to hit more often, which is Oakland, Potwin, and a few of those, especially in the leaf season, they will be hitting more often. So you can see on that one scale how we got the new schedule set up. They might go hit 1, 2, 3 zone, and then say Potwin's 5, they'll go back and hit that before they go to 6. That way them areas are getting hit more often, and it won't be as heavy when we're there.
Okay. So right now, not every curbed street in Topeka is getting hit twice a year, right?
No, for the most part they are, yes.
Except for your neighborhood,
except for out in there, that area. But in the last year and a half since we started that, every area has been getting hit twice a year.
All right, very good, thank you. Councilman Emerson?
I think Councilwoman Valdez-Yakla, maybe.
Yes, Councilwoman.
I have a couple of questions. Just again, because it's a challenge to hear, and I'm in a car right now. Can you tell me, with the Oakland area, you're saying 3 times every 130 some days, is that correct?
that's correct. That's what we're proposing to start doing. That's actually what we began sweeping now to start with, and that's what we're proposing to do. We start in Potwin with 1, and then we will immediately go to Oakland, which is 8 and 9, and sweep those. And then you're in your car right now, so you can't see the schedule, but we have a schedule that just doesn't go 1 through 11 now. It'll repeat periodically through that 1 through 11 to make sure that those areas get hit until we get that number up to 1.62 curb miles per hour.
Okay, and also when you're talking about the increase in amount and times that you're going to go in and cleaning Oakland, will there be dates? I mean, I know you have to account for weather, but will there be ballparks that you'll be able to give, like the council people, and when they can expect the cleaning, the sweepers to come through?
There's no reason we couldn't do that.
Okay, I'm just saying, if somebody wants to write down, and I'll follow through with you guys on it, I would certainly appreciate that. The amount of trees and all of the fall, that comes when obviously when all the leaves start falling. And once we get a little bit of rain on there, and we have so many motorcycles coming up and down that area, and the high rate of traffic as well, I think it's really going to be beneficial to see an increase in the amount of times that you guys are out there, for sure. And then the other question I had, when you're talking about the increase in street sweeping, does this also include the bridges like the Santa Fe Bridge and Sardu Bridge, et cetera?
Yeah, that we have put that on the schedule. The night crew does them, and so we will have those done more frequently than what had been happening.
Well, does that mean the 3 times per the 130 some days that you're talking about?
Yes, we can add that in with the night crew sweeping. So when they're out in that sweeping in that zone at night or whatever, they can hit that area as well. Yes.
Okay, because it does, especially the Santa Fe Bridge and the Sardi Bridge, they, I'm not going to go as far as to say they junked up, but they sure do get a lot of debris, smaller debris on them that can make them look unsightly and uninviting for people that are coming into the community. So definitely appreciate that concentration on there as well. That's all I have, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman Emerson.
Thank you, Chair. Gentlemen, thank you for your presentation. I guess, as you know, I had some questions after I reviewed this on Friday that I sent, and you guys did provide some answers, but I guess one of the things I'm trying to wrap my head around is how much do you guys spend a year on the street sweeping? Because I couldn't quite make out from the spreadsheet you had, because some it looked like it was per unit, but then at the bottom there was a huge number that was like everything, but none of the numbers added up to that, so I wasn't certain where that, and I don't need the answer right now. If that's something you can provide, that would be.
I think we talked about.
No, that total number that you saw that was big was for even the inactive sweepers, and it was a total for a 4-year period. So it wasn't even the inactive sweepers that we're going to that are tagged out that we aren't using anymore. Their maintenance costs over the time that they were used was in that number, and it was total. It wasn't per year; it was a total for a 4-year period. So the active sweepers that we're using, I have another chart showing that, which totals the $44,000 a year. So to answer your question, it's a little over $44,000 per year. That is the maintenance cost for the 3 sweepers and the flush truck that are the active pieces that we use.
Okay.
We didn't include the dump trucks into that because those are just vehicles that we use anyway. Regardless of what purpose we're using, we didn't include the dump trucks in that.
Right. And I'm sorry, I guess what I'm trying to get my head around is what does all the street sweeping cost? And you would have to include the dump truck cost because a third party coming in would have to use whatever equipment, they'd have to have all that equipment. So that's already in those bids is the total to do all that stuff, right?
Yeah, the dump truck costs, I have those numbers. I can give them to you. They still wouldn't come close to that, but I can give those to you if you want.
Yeah, that'd be great, because at the end of the day, we're charged with looking at, what we're spending now, what the other options are, and making, I guess a decision based on those criteria.
I understand what you're saying. Bear in mind, though, that just like labor, these dump trucks would be repurposed, so there wouldn't be a savings. They would just be moved, and so the maintenance and fuel costs wouldn't go away on those dump trucks.
Sure, but I'd also say, though, constituents would love to see those dump trucks out fixing streets rather than, following the sweepers. So it's not a zero-sum thing. It's not, they're not going to park them. And so, because that's, as you guys know, that's the number one complaint we get is fix the streets, fix the streets, fix the streets. And so that's my main thing. Anytime that we can shift money so that more maintenance or repair of streets is being done, I'm in favor of that. I guess my other question was, sorry, Mr. Workman, you sent the chart earlier today with the zones, and I know Mr. Trower said that a vac truck goes out and does. Is that the blue zones? It does.
Yep.
Okay. What's the difference between the vac truck and the others? Are the others like mechanical sweepers?
Yes. The 3-wheelers are mechanical sweepers. The vac truck is you drive it. It's a unit, and it's like a regenerative air kind of, and in the bottom, and it sucks it up, and it does the exact same thing, but it's more. Mobile, I guess. You can drive it at highway speed, so that's why it goes out and does the outer areas, and then it can drive and dump at Lakewood instead of having to have a dump truck. So if it's around, you can go highway speed with it.
So, and I guess then my question would be, Isn't that a lot more economical than the ones that require a dump truck to go with them?
In a residential area, it'd be tough with that, especially with cars, because it's a lot bigger unit.
Okay.
I wouldn't.
Harder to maneuver.
Yeah, it's very hard to maneuver in more of a tighter residential area. Like Oakland would be very tough to get that down the streets through there. You could do the main lines, but the other streets, I wouldn't want to take that through there. It's a pretty good sized truck.
It also is not nearly as effective when it comes to lifting leaves from the ground. The mechanical is necessary to get the leaf material off.
Okay.
And so the vac trucks, they get stuck as far as the material trying to go through the vacuum.
And that was kind of some of all the bids that we got, those were all regenerative air units, and we've tried out 3 of them, and we tried them in the Oakland area, and with the heavy leaves, and then your pavement has to be pretty darn smooth and with no imperfections. If it does, it loses vacuum, and it will not suck up, and if you have a street that's deteriorated, it will suck that up as well. So we just didn't have any good luck with them when we tried it. So
Problem solved.
yeah, we did try them out because that's the new going thing. I mean, that's what they keep trying to show us and sell us, but we weren't pleased with what we were getting when we were looking at those. So that's why we stayed with the Elgin 3-wheelers and the vac truck.
Okay. I guess my question would be, though, I mean, based on the leaves, though, I mean, a lot of these areas are, heavily treed areas. So I guess it seems weird that one type works out here. And I mean, I do understand in some of these older areas, like Potwin, for instance, with those huge oak trees, a lot of leaves there. But I also see other areas that also have it similar, and I'm just, I don't know.
And some of those areas, they'll have to go over them twice with that vac truck when it gets heavy.
Okay.
It's not sometimes just a one-time deal. It's just, but that's why the cycle time, the more we're getting there and constantly doing it, the less accumulated things there is. So that's why we're trying to hit them more often and get them cleaned up.
Okay.
Something I wanted to add real quick too, and we did it when I first came here, and we are I will get back to doing it, is in the Oakland and Potwin, all the residential areas, we do have signage that I had purchased to put out the day before for people parking on the sides of the street. We are implementing that. That's going to go back in, so then we'll be put back out so folks can move their cars knowing that we're going to be sweeping that area the next day or so. So that will be implemented back in the process.
That's all I had. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Lesser, any questions? Apparently not. Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like someone to contact me. I think it's time for me to take a sweeper tour to get a better understanding of the 2 different vehicles. So if somebody would email me, we'll line that up. I've never done that since I was a little kid, and my dad drove the sweeper. I did it illegally. I'd like to do it legal now. But so that way I get a better understanding of what you're talking about. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We'll email you and we'll have you come out and we'll show you all the sweepers.
Fortunately, I think the statute of limitations is probably run on that illegal sweeper ride. So you're in good shape.
I was going to point out, Councilman, you are safe. There is a statute of limitations on that.
Thank you.
Well, I appreciate that. My dad was a single father, so sometimes I had to jump in those sweepers. So.
And I'm sorry, Chair, one more question I had.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Trower, you had the sweeping schedule from 1 through 12, but I think the outline are 13 through 21B. And I didn't know if you had that or if you could send that.
Oh, the whole map? I do have a whole map, and I can send that. I didn't get it sent in so everybody could have a copy of that. I apologize.
Yeah.
This morning. So we do have some copies if somebody would like that now, and then if not, I can email it to you electronically as well.
The map?
Yep.
Yeah, I meant this schedule, though.
I have that.
Okay. We have it, yep. We just didn't
The one I
send
had,
it.
I think, only went to 12.
Yeah. Okay. Yep,
Great.
we'll get that to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I think, I'm guessing we'd probably like an update in maybe 3 months just on how the progress you are making on the street sweeping.
Okay.
All right, next item is discussion of signage. I will note that we have about 20 minutes left here in our 2 hours. Time flies when you're discussing interesting items like this. So if we're not able to get the entire presentation in, we can go ahead and pick it up next time. So
Who's doing the presentation? Are you? Who was doing the uncontrolled sign presentation?
I'm assuming the the traffic engineer.
Christy, that's right, Christy's online. There she is.
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't even understand what presentation was next. It is very difficult to hear you guys in that room, I tell you what. So this isn't intended to be long. I just informational for the most part, and give you an opportunity to ask some questions, and we can do some follow-up conversations later. So last month, there were a lot of topics that I was requested to talk about, and we've kind of broken it up over the next few months. So we'll take them in small chunks. This one's uncontrolled intersections. So there are a number of different ways of controlling intersections, and you're very familiar with them. We've got signals, yield signs, stop signs, and we also have uncontrolled intersections, which means there's no signing telling everybody who gets to go first or who has the right of way. So there's good and bad to uncontrolled intersections, as you can probably guess. Negatives, of course, people are not looking for them, or they assume they have the right of way and they don't slow down for them. But uncontrolled intersections are only in low volume neighborhood type road intersections. We have far fewer crashes, and it does facilitate smoother traffic flows in these intersections. We want to reserve signing for those places where we really want people to yield every time they get there, or stop every time they get to there, no matter what the conditions are. Unfortunately, Topeka has used stop and yield signs as a means of traffic calming instead of controlling intersections. And so we have a lot of intersections, and Oakland comes to mind first, where we have used stop or yield signs every block. Sometimes they switch. There's really not much rhyme or reason to it. The intent there is to slow down traffic on certain roadways rather than actually control the intersection, and that is problematic. So how are we supposed to behave at an uncontrolled intersection? It is state statute, and it tells you that right of way when you're approaching the intersection, when two vehicles approach from different approaches at approximately the same time, the driver of the vehicle on the left shall yield to the vehicle on the right. It's fairly simple. We use the same kind of rule for a four-way stop. I think that it's possible that people forget this. We took driver's ed back when we were teenagers, and for me, that was a really long time ago. So I do have to follow a manual on uniform traffic control. It's an FHWA book, which if you haven't seen it, I have a copy of it here. I can share with you someday. It's pretty big. It is federal law. So how they use the MUTCD, we have some concepts, and then they put together some requirements that try to meet those concepts. So some of our overarching concepts are that drivers will do what they want. However, most drivers are reasonable and prudent. And if we balance the regulatory controls against what is reasonable for conditions, most drivers will obey. And so in order to meet those concepts and try to have a flexible roadway with signing, we install stop signs only where they're warranted. And there are volume warrants, speed limit warrants, and there are crash warrants as well. Another example of MTCD approaches trying to find reasonableness, 85th percentile. We're all familiar with Hay. The speed limit is set by the majority of traffic, right or wrong. Signals also have warrants associated with them. Although I am allowed engineering judgment, it is not typically applied in some of these situations until there's a lot of gray area. Unwarranted stop signs are frustrating and often ignored. especially when placed every or every other block on a neighborhood roadway. And I think that a lot of us, whether it's in Topeka or in other cities, have experienced areas where there's stop signs. After about 3, I get frustrated and I go somewhere else. Whoops. I knew that video wasn't, oh, there it is gonna load. I wanna take a moment to talk a little bit about inattention versus mistakes, because I think it's a subtle thing that we need to start paying attention to. So in designing our roadways, we want to make room for mistakes. Drivers make mistakes, we're human, all right, it's gonna happen. But we cannot use geometrics or signing to force drivers to pay attention. A driver that's not paying attention is not going to see a sign, unfortunately. Adding signs where they're not warranted in hopes drivers will be more attentive is an approach that we've been doing for a long, long time. And you can make your own judgments about the outcomes. Wider roads is one way of, hey, inattentive drivers or people that are falling asleep or errant, we're gonna make a wider road so they don't crash as often. Or we're gonna increase speed limits because people want to drive that fast, or they don't notice they need to be slowing down. More and more and more signs. And in terms of signs, I really want to express that Topeka has done a pretty good job keeping the number of signs down. But maybe you guys can do me a favor and on your way home tonight or tomorrow on your way to work, make a point of trying to count the number of signs that you pass, or at least read them all from your workplace to your home, and see how many you really have, see how many you haven't seen in a long time or are surprising that they're in those locations, because I think you will be surprised. And I want to talk a little bit about Vision Zero real quickly, because that is our ultimate goal. You're going to hear it from our CSAT group, our Complete Streets Advisory Committee group. It's a national conversation right now. A lot of cities, states, counties are on board with Vision Zero. Vision Zero means that we are working towards 0 fatalities. So while I give you guys information that says, hey, stop signs, yield signs, kind of only when really needed, and there's a lot of places where they're not needed, we are also working for Vision Zero. And I'm going to play a real quick video about making a mistake rather than inattentiveness. Oh, and it's going to work.
Sound. Okay.
Let's come up with our own dialogue here.
Yeah. I can think of a few words that might be.
You can't hear the sound. How sad is that?
Oh.
Definitely not going to play it again. I do have a link in the handouts. You guys can find it on your own. There are a number of other kinds of videos out there that other states are doing for traffic safety and Vision Zero, and concepts of speed management, speed choice, seat belts, that sort of thing. So I apologize you couldn't hear the sound. I don't know why that was the case. So really the question here is to control or not to control these intersections. Stop signs are considered, in the city of Topeka, we consider them only per the MUTCD. So higher volume roadways with crash history. And these criteria are rarely met in residential intersections. Yield signs can be installed per engineering judgment as directed by the MUTCD. But something else to note is that residents do want slower traffic. And if you're not aware, Lawrence did just lower their residential speed limits across town to 25 miles an hour. But it's more signing the answer. I don't know that it's really a two-sided coin. To control or not to control, what else can we do? And I think that we might have an opportunity to do some driver education instead and see how that works, especially at certain intersections. There's a number of intersections in town where I'm really afraid drivers approach it and go, I'm on the main road. I'm not supposed to be the one that slows down. And we want to educate them that, yeah, no, this is an uncontrolled intersection, that you are required to yield to the person on the right, even if you feel like you're on the main road. Then if we continue to have problems at certain intersections after we've done driver education, we can talk about installing signs. So I have begun a project to figure out how to do some driver education. So we have those crosswalk in-road signs, and you've probably seen them around town where they say state law, yield to pedestrians in crosswalk. They're temporarily installed. We move them around based on requests and crashes, and we get a great response by drivers. We want to use similar type signs to convey information about uncontrolled intersections. The catch is that these signs are not MUTC compliant, which means that I have to request formal experimentation with FHWA, and I'm in the process of doing that. Hopefully we will see some of these signs out this summer, and if you do see them, I'm looking forward to feedback. Any questions?
All right, questions from the committee? Councilman Emerson?
Thank you, Chair. Mrs. Erickson, thank you for the presentation. The question I get more often, and you alluded to this in your presentation, is slower traffic speeds. And I think we tend to overestimate, I doubt people are really going 70 miles an hour through some of these residential, but, 40 miles an hour looks fast going through down your street. I know the city's loath to do speed bumps, especially permanent. Is there ever a case to put in like temporary speed bumps or anything like that? Is there something like that could be done?
I would say yes. However, there's still a cost. The idea, the concept of traffic calming is actually kind of a big one that I would like to discuss at another meeting, because we can open up a lot of points of discussion.
Thank you.
All right, Councilman Lesser?
I do not.
All right, thank you. Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala.
Thank you, Chair. I think that we need to set something up for future dialogue. I would like to hear more about what the ideas are for driver education. I will tell you that racetrack more than it was already. Streets that run north and south, specifically Chester, Forest, Lake. I see mostly older, beat-up cars trying to propel themselves from one end of the street to the other at going, I'm sure, 50 miles an hour or more. I think part of the issue that we're looking at with the higher speed zones, what I've noticed in the past year or more, probably a year and a half, is with the continued detours that we have. And at times when you have 4th Street shut down, you have River Road shut down, you have different areas of construction, and it makes it difficult for people to get out to work and to come back home from work. But I see that we're in a short, time frame, but certainly I think we need to discuss this more, whether that means giving more tickets, which, as I said, last meeting, does not work, because once a lot of Oakland people see that there is TPD out, they will start broadcasting it on the Oakland page, and it kind of defeats the purpose. I'm for looking at all measures. I was told by one person that maybe the speed bumps were detrimental to emergency vehicle response, like to fire engines and things of that nature. So I would definitely want to explore that more. But we need to do something specifically in Oakland, because the level of traffic has increased. And to me, it's just getting more and more out of control.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I believe we are going to continue this discussion in future meetings, talking about speed limits and some other things. So should be good discussion. All right, Councilwoman Ortiz, did you have a question?
Thank you all.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot. We have one more item, one more presentation. City Manager?
Yes, we'll have, go ahead and have Silly Davis come forward. Yes.
Yeah, can you man that presentation? Okay, I'll try to be quick because I know there will be a lot of questions. I'm Sylvia Davis. For those of you that don't know me, I oversee and get to work with the folks who do utilities maintenance and operations for the city. Today we're going to really quickly run through this presentation over sanitary sewer line repairs. In this discussion, we're going to be focusing on this area in red. So the cross section of the pipe that is shown in the lower right-hand corner with a little blue speck in the bottom, that's a graphic of the city sewer line and the water that would be running through that. The line from the house is the private service lateral. So the area in red is what we call a Y, and that is the responsibility of the private homeowner, but is the point of contention when we have a repair letter go out. So I'm kind of skipping ahead a little bit, but go for it. According to code, I just wanted to highlight really quickly that 13.20.150 calls out the maintenance responsibilities, the repair responsibilities for private sewer lines and the repair of those lines. And it notes that the first indication of sewer failure or potential failure may vary. So the next slide will show you the most obvious way to tell if there's an issue below ground. So we call these catastrophic failures. This is when over time a void, a break in the line, whether it's on a city line or a Y connection, a break that causes soil to flow into the system will eventually cause repair above a void on the surface. At this point, it's very obvious that there's something wrong. So we will televise that line to determine what happened. And this is actually a picture from our televising efforts of the line that was on the left-hand side of that earlier slide. So that is where a trash truck fell through an alley because of a void in the system. So what this picture is a little hard to see, but you can see our camera is running through the city line, and you'll see the water levels there. There's no blockages. The sewage is flowing free and clear. However, up above, you see where a historical, this is VCP pipe, vitrified clay pipe, and you see a connection has been broken into our city main so that private service can flow into the main. And because that was not properly connected, the pipe is broken and we have a lot of soil infiltrating in, and eventually that loss of soil causes that void above ground and causes failure on the surface. So this is what we refer to as catastrophic failure. So according to this code, like I said, it dictates whose responsibility it is to repair. So if there is a problem on the city main, if the city main has collapsed, if there's a blockage, it is the city's responsibility to repair those. However, if the issue is where that connection is, the Y, then it is the homeowner's or the property owner's responsibility to make those repairs. And the code calls out that those repairs are supposed to be done within 7 days of being notified. So really quickly, the process moves. We get a complaint, whether that is a void on the surface or a blockage in the system. We will go out and televise the line to determine the cause or whose responsibility it might be. And then if it's a city line failure, we would contract the repairs to the city main. If the issue is on the private owner side, then we will work with them. We try to do calls or knock and talks with them. And then if there's no connection made with that owner, we'll send a repair letter. And I'll talk to that here in a minute. If we're unable to make connections with that owner and our letters and our calls go unanswered, then we have the ability to contract out those repairs and just go ahead and have those made. As the picture showed, if we have an entire alley shut down, that can cause major issues for the people that need to access that alleyway. And so in times of alley failure, or if there's sewage on the surface that may cause public health and safety issues, then that's where that 7 days comes into play, and we can reduce that if needed based on the severity of the issue. So a little bit of history on how we've handled these. Prior to 2019, we took the catastrophic failure approach. So if there was an obvious void, if we could identify that this was a private issue, we would send out a letter, or we would contract out those repairs and then assess it back to homeowners. And it was few and far between, only because of the management of that system. We didn't televise as much as we do now. So in 2016, we had a couple letters go out, and then 4 letters in 17, 1 letter in 18. So it wasn't very frequent that we had to communicate with homeowners the need to repair their connection. But then in 2019, we tried to take a more proactive approach. We said, hey, we've upped our televising efforts, and we are seeing a lot in the system. And if we go down a neighborhood alley and we see a lot of broken connections that have root intrusion, why wouldn't we want to tell customers that they might have a problem? Or if they don't now, it might be a good idea to keep in mind that they could have issues in the future and possibly want to start saving. So our proactive approach was, let's send out letters, tell them, and we have courtesy letters, and then we have what we were referred to internally as demand letters. So the courtesy letters were, hey, here's a picture of your connection, just want to let you know. The demand letters were, you have an issue that needs repaired, please call us so we can work this out. As you can imagine, sending 47 letters out to concentrated neighborhoods didn't go over very well. It was concentrated solely based on the fact that that's where we were televising at the time. So that resulted in several council members and us internally as staff receiving a lot of phone calls from citizens and plumbers trying to figure out what's going on. Why would you send a letter out if there's no void on the surface? This doesn't make sense. Our line's fine because my plumber told me so. So based on trying to troubleshoot all of what happened during that, I'll call it an experiment, we took a step back and said, let's look at this again and switch some things up. So last year, we decided to go ahead and revert back to that catastrophic failure approach. 2020, we had 13 letters go out. Had a couple of disputes on that. We try to work really hard with homeowners and help them troubleshoot. So if there's a dispute, like this doesn't make sense to me, or my plumber's not seeing what you guys are seeing, we'll go out and re-televise. We'll do some dye testing. We want to make sure that we're asking for responsible repairs. And then to date this year, we've had 7 letters go out. So options for homeowners or commercial owners that might need to make a repair, they can hire that private contractor themselves. This is where once we make contact with them, we'll extend the time and tell them, we're not going to pressure you. The police aren't going to come get you after 7 days. We just want to know if you're working on it, how much time you might need. We want to give them time to get private bids so that they can make a responsible decision on who to hire to make those repairs. They can request us to make those repairs. Go ahead and we'll hire the contractor and have those repairs done, and then we can assess the bill back to them. Or if there's, like I said before, if there's no response, we can go ahead and make it happen and then place a lien and assess it back after the fact. So talking through that, the process improvements that we've made, we've tried to approach this from a customer service aspect in a way that we have not really done before. Again, we halted the courtesy letters just to prevent confusion to people. We have upped our personal contact staff. After 2019 and prior, it just didn't happen as much. We gave the directive that they really needed to make all attempts to contact a customer face-to-face or via the phone so that the letter that they were receiving in the mail wasn't a shock to them. We wanted to try to talk through this with them before they received the letter in the mail. We've also been revamping that letter, and we're now including some educational information in our correspondence. We've worked with some other municipalities to kind of see how they work through this process. Most of them do it the way we have done it historically, but we're building some brochures and then trying to have flexible repair arrangements when it's appropriate. Again, sometimes the issue is so severe that we just can't wait, but most of the time it's probably been broken for a while, so what's another couple weeks? And then we have developed this pilot sanitary sewer service line repair cost share program. It's a mouthful. This program, again, this is a pilot program that we've been working to try to set up and help fund some of these repairs for those that simply can't afford it. That's the biggest complaint we get. Most people don't have a savings built up to help offset the cost of private sewer repairs. So especially for someone on a fixed income or in dire straits with large families, this could be very detrimental to them. So this program that we're working on is in partnership with the Division of Housing Services, and it will provide funding of up to $50,000 annually from our wastewater operating budget. So we're gonna set aside $50,000. If all of that money is not spent in a year, we will let it build up to $75,000 and see where that gets us. Again, this is a pilot program, so we're gonna kind of play with it and give ourselves a little bit of wiggle room depending on how frequently it's used. It will allow assistance to, we're guessing about 20 low-income homeowners. So the requirements are that they meet HUD guidelines and 80% of median income. And the city will pay 50% of the first $5,000 in repair costs, or up to $2,500 per applicant. So this pilot program will be separate from an existing emergency repair program. So the existing program is still administered through Division of Housing Services, but that's where the most desperate need is available through a grant and a mortgage program that they administer. So those are when issues cause immediate health and safety concerns, and they're in the private property. So they're either between the connection to the city and the city line and the home in that service lateral, or maybe it's an internal issue. But those problems will be addressed and have been addressed through that emergency repair program. Corey and her division have worked with us for years and help us help those customers. So that was quick, a lot of information, but those are the things that we have kind of done to try to address some of these repair issues that you all have probably heard about through constituents.
All right, questions from the committee. Councilman Emerson?
Not at this time, Chair.
Councilman Lesser? He may have signed off. All right. Yeah. All right. Councilwoman Ortiz. Questions, comments? Nope. All right. Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala.
Yes, I do. Can you tell me, I could not hear, who was making the presentation right now?
Sylvia Davis.
Oh, okay. I'm wondering, Chair, is there any way that I could request that, since we're out of time, to come back and talk further about this? I think that this pilot program and some of the past history with the main breaks and the why and all of this could use further dialogue. And, you know, I'm just asking for that.
Absolutely. I don't see any reason we couldn't. I mean, we do need more time just for discussion, and we're out of time. So I think, assuming Sylvia can come back next time.
Sure.
Great. We appreciate that. Good overview. All right. I think we are down to items from the staff. Anything, City Manager? Oh, yeah. Okay. Any other items from the committee? Any other items? Certainly.
So I did want to provide an update, and I'll send an email follow-up once we receive bids. But last month we talked about the FIRM program and the allotment towards emergency repairs. We did have a break in our fire line here at Holiday last week, and are currently working up bids to get that repaired between the emergency response that was required given the overflow, and there will be pictures included, as well as the anticipated repairs to both the fire line and very dated water main coming out of the building. We're looking at an estimated probably $30,000 to $40,000, but we're still waiting on final bids. But I will send out a recap to this committee so that you are aware of how we are allocating that FIRM emergency fund.
All right. Thank you. Anything else? All right. I believe we're adjourned. Thank you very much.
Councilman, this